For my AIP project, I chose meeting the needs through technology. A little bit about me. I am now going into my third year as a special education Strat 1 teacher. I'm actually switching roles this year, and I'm going to be a lead support teacher in the special education department, which really is more of like an IDS role. In my district, we do more special education as like resource type, so reading, writing, math, social emotional behavior, and behavior, and I have experience in the K-6 setting. Problem of practice. So with the IDEA in 2004, they explicitly stated that all children with disabilities should have access and make progress in the general education standards, and that removal from general education should only happen when the need is there. So if they cannot be met within the general education setting with accommodations, modifications, teachers' assistants, paras, they should be educated, all students should be educated in the least restrictive environment. So the general problem is, how do we meet those needs in the general education classroom, depending on the needs of the students? How are we ensuring that those needs are met, and how the students are being included in ensuring that equal access to education? And my more specific problem is, how can I do that? I had 15 kids on my caseload last year. I had a teacher. I think I had 10 teachers that I had to work with. So how can I ensure with my little time and my little resources that I have within my building that I am specifically meeting all of those needs in the general education classroom? And not only for my students, but for my teachers as well. So one of the themes I found in my research was collaboration. A lot of people have different ideas about collaboration and what collaboration is, what collaboration means, and have different collaboration skills that they have acquired through their experience, because collaboration is not something that everybody has. It's kind of something that you have to work towards. So they defined it as a professional partnership between two or more co-equal educators who share responsibility, accountability, and resources. When a student is being educated in the general education classroom and they have an IEP, it is both the special education teacher's responsibility as long as with the general education teacher's responsibility to make sure that that student's being educated. It is not all on one person. So that's where the responsibility, the accountability, and the resources come in for that. And collaboration is mutually beneficial for both the teachers and the students. Not only will the students get the outcomes of the collaboration, but both teachers can learn from each other. Inclusion was another theme. Inclusion is kind of, I think, the biggest theme in my opinion. Obviously, IDEA requires a free and appropriate education for all students, that students are educated in the least restrictive environment. And I think it's important to note, too, that the least restrictive environment does not always mean the general education classroom. It is where the students' needs can be met. I had a student this year that the least restrictive environment for them was not the general education classroom. But we really try Gen Ed first, because all of the services within special education are on a continuum, and that can look different for every student depending on the needs. If the student has one goal and they have a reading goal and they just get pulled out for 20 minutes a day, obviously they're in Gen Ed for the rest of the day. I've had students with like 12 goals, and that was a lot of their day was not in Gen Ed. But we try to have universal supports, tier 1 for all students, and only remove them when their needs cannot be met within the setting. There's also the option for co-teaching, like to have the teacher come to them in the setting instead of the teacher removing them from the setting. So there's a lot of different things that come with inclusion, but with IDEA, and there has been a movement for more inclusion, a lot of students with disabilities are being educated for a majority of their day in the general education classroom. This calls for my third theme, which is support. Because this is kind of, I don't want to say newer, because 2004 was obviously 20 years ago, but there's some teachers that have went through prep programs where this was not the movement and not in laws and not the norm, so they don't have the training or the resources that some other people have to have inclusive classrooms. So they need support to be able to teach students with complex needs within their classrooms because they just have never had that learning. Also, the importance of administration support. And this kind of focuses around the collaboration. Teachers have so much on their plate. There's teaching, there's meetings, there's lesson planning, there's all of these things that just pile onto our plates. And so a lot of times collaboration can kind of get pushed to the back and not get stressed in how important it is. So like administration support on that would help ensure that it's happening. So one of my first implementation ideas was a resource website. So this would be a website that I would create and that I was planning on using Wix for the general education teachers, the paraeducators, the specialist teachers, anybody in the building who needs those resources to build the knowledge around special education. It would have articles about how to manage behavior. It would have accommodation, like different like graphic organizers, sentence stems, all of those different things. In the Peterson article that I read, there is a lack of training and resources for general education teachers when it comes to being inclusive in teaching students with disabilities. Because again, I'm supporting the general education teachers, but I also have to teach all day too. So that's hard to ensure that both jobs are getting done. The limitations I found with this is it would take a lot of time and energy, which is something that time is something that all teachers lack. So that was kind of my hesitation towards this one, but overall I think it would be a really great idea to help with that support and sharing of resources that is available to everybody. My second one was a lower tech option. I actually use this in my practices already. Collaborative planning between teachers to help increase that inclusion. Again, it has the positive outcomes for both teachers and students. So it kind of breaks it down. Math, reading, science, social studies, and then like special events. So then like, what are you doing this week? How can we support each other? What accommodations do you need me to make? What do I need from you? Who's doing what, to kind of divvy up all of those tasks. This works great if both members of the team, I think, are willing to work towards it. It works great if both members of the team are planning ahead. It's hard when things come up and in the middle after you have your like weekly planning session, but overall it works pretty well. Google software is what I ended up picking for my last implementation. So the ones that I was more specifically focusing on was Google Calendar, Google Drive, Google Docs, and email. The plan was to have a Google Drive for each student. So I would set up for each of my students and I would share it with their general education teacher. And we would both be putting resources in. So they would put like the gen ed resources in that they need help with. I would put in like IEP at a glance where it outlines all of their needs, their checklist for accommodations, their like if they have a behavior plan, their behavior checklist. With the Google Calendar, we would set up recurring meetings. Google Docs, we would use that planning document that I just talked about. And then the email would just have that open line of communication constantly. The best part about this is that we should all already have access. I think most schools are Google schools. And so it's something that wouldn't take a lot of learning to implement because everybody has access. Everybody kind of is already familiar with Google. And so therefore it should be easier to implement. It's not like a learning curve on the implementation. And this would allow both teachers to share their expertise and their knowledge. General education teachers, depending on the grade, have that, like that content is their expertise, whereas my expertise isn't necessarily every grade's content, but more of like student-specific things for the students that are on my caseload. So I could share those with them and they could share the content and we could work together to make sure that the students are being included. So when I was thinking about implementation, obviously because it's a summer, we didn't get to implement, the collaboration of special education and general education and paraprofessionals involve effective communication, cooperation, joint problem-solving, planning, and finding solution. And this is critical for the students to be included. And with all of those things, we could do that with the Google Drive and all of the resources that we can implement together in our collaboration meetings. It also helps close the gaps of knowledge. Having that weekly time together can be used to ask each other questions. Hey, so-and-so has been showing this behavior. Like, I just want to make sure I'm responding to the behavior correctly. Hey, the students have been having a hard time with this content area. Like, can you also help? And then it also helps build on time management, content knowledge, communication, conflict resolution to help build those effective communication skills. As teachers, we're constantly communicating with the students, with each other, with parents. So, like, having great communication skills is never a bad thing. Strengths of the Google software is there's no subscriptions or extra purchases. It's free for us if you have the Google email. The implementation should be pretty simple. There's no learning curve. The information is available to anywhere you can access your Google Drive. So it's not like, oh, I forgot that paper at school. Like, you have that access wherever you have technology access. And then the sharing of information becomes easier. I do everything on my computer. So, like, I can just drag and drop into the Google Drive and it's just there. And it's also important, IEPs are legally binding. A lot of it needs to be locked, and technically if it's on your computer, like a password protected computer, that's locked, which then you can share more information, because if I were to give you a paper copy of their IEP, that would have to be locked away. So then it helps that piece too. Limitations. Both teachers have to be willing to participate in the collaborative relationship. I think that is the biggest obstacle I've seen in a lot of my relationships, is like not having that equal participation in the collaboration. And then I've never got to implement it, so I don't know if it's as simple as it seems in my mind. And the implementation may vary based on the complexity of needs. If you have a student with one reading goal, you might not need to meet every week, and you might not have much to talk about because they are already included, and it's not hard to accommodate those needs. But if you have a student that has a lot of needs, it might take more time. It might have a lot more layers to that communication and to that collaboration. 21st century teaching. I think this applies, this project and this method is everything I feel like now is done with technology. My teacher, my school and my district does everything by Google Calendar already. We very rarely get anything handed to us. It's all emailed, it's all online. Everyone has devices now. Like, we are a one-to-one school. I think a lot of schools are trying to move that way if they're not already. Like, our district provides the students and the teachers all with devices, so like everybody has that access to the internet, and it's easier access to the information. Again, you don't have to forget the computer or forget the paper at school. A lot of people have their computer. If you don't have your computer, you have your phone. It increases engagement, I think, when you use technology in your teaching with your students. It's more fun. The kids enjoy it, and it also is improving their technology literacy. Technology is never going away. It's always evolving, and it's important that kids are aware on how to use it. Technology fads. I think that it's important to, the reason I picked the Google is because it's like tried and true. I know how to use it. Everybody kind of knows how to use it. It doesn't really change very much. A lot of the technology fads, there's not a lot of information to back up if it's going to work, if it's going to stay around, if it's going to serve the purpose that you want it to. When things like Google that have been around for many years, you know what you're getting, you know that it's reliable, and you know that it's going to work for what you need it to work for. And then here are some of the resources that I included in my presentation. Obviously I had more, but just they're the ones in my presentation. Thank you.